Yeah, and I got a chance to pull color checker up and just look at it briefly for a minute to
Oh,
think of what I wanted to say about it. The two, it's above an above and below um, set of two single frame animations that were made by frame at a time, moving a light source. Um, and the two pieces, the two little painting sculptures um, that are used in those animations are part of a series of paintings that are kind of the earliest part of code practice that were about trying to establish um, subtle relationships with color. One of the things that I know as an artist is once you bend the plane of of substrate, light hits each part of that in a different way. So when I'm painting on multiple angled panels like the two pieces in color checker, the relationships between the color are very kinetic and very unstable, and they move depending on where they are in the room. They move with the with the way the light hits them, and they are incredibly susceptible to a light source in a way that a flat painting is not, because the relationships the relationships in these things change a lot. So a very simple painting becomes a very complicated thing. And these paintings had been adjusted and painted and painted and painted. Um, Yet they still remain sort of provisional. And once I made the animations of these two pieces, thinking that I was playing with the shadow play and doing that, then you realize that Adobe Premiere gives you the opportunity to further adjust those colors and to further tweak them. So I really began to play with actually changing the color in the video as after it was produced, and playing with a series of color changing episodes with each of the loops. And then
it's almost as though the shadow is what the shadow passes is what's doing the color change.
Yeah,
doing the work.
It's you know, that's a fiction in the thing, and it's funny because it did prompt some questions about what the technique was from some of my students that saw it, but that was the decision. And there's also a different pace with each one. One's slightly longer than the other, and so as they both loop, the relationship between the two changes. So I'm looking at it in a stopped segment here, and there's a hot pink and an orange, hot pink panel showing on the top one and a kind of an orange panel showing on the bottom one. And that particular relationship and the way the shadows are moving will not show up again. It's maybe a 3-minute video of these loops over and over, yet it's constantly changing in very subtle ways. And I think what I like about this color checker as this photographic tool that you hold up when you're documenting work, and so you can once you get back into the computer or the studio, you can adjust all the color in the images and white balance and everything according to this color checker.
I
And
can also recall, Jim, seeing something at your studio where you were relating different colors in a manual fashion. And you created an earlier piece of code practice where maybe the color changes were more explicit without an object or a mechanism, like
yeah,
in color checker. And now color checker is yet a different,
yeah,
different piece with sound.
that's right. And then and that video piece that you saw was a result of of the same idea. And that's a piece that turned into a piece that was in the original code practice show here in Kansas City. And we have, hopefully we'll get around to moving that piece up to Duluth as well. But
I was going to ask, do you think, like when you pointed out the pink and the orange, I mean, when you watch your own work like that, are you putting that away? If something works that you might not have, you know,
I,
purposely or manually put together, does it?
I guess, yeah, I'm sure of that in some kind of intuitive way. And I mean, we're always just building our intuitions about color when we do these things. But this piece and the piece that you're referring to, which were squares moving on, uh, um, moving on a rack of squares of different colors, and they changed different times. Those were um, originally instigated as kind of a reference to Stanley Whitney paintings,
Mm.
who has kind of utilized a grid format over and over and over and over. So he got down to really just the improvisation of choosing colors in these paintings. And I guess what I've always had a hard time with as an artist is building the necessary hierarchy to decide what works and what doesn't work. That once you add time into the process, then what works in one instant will not work the next day at the same time, and the next day at the same time. That is unstable also, in a way that these paintings that I'm making in 3 dimensions are unstable in relationship to the environment. Color choices and relationships are unstable, are unstable in relationship to my own psychology. So in many ways, I'm playing with that idea that that the change and the dynamism of these animations and of the movement and space around these things are as important to me as the notion that I can decide on the proper color for a certain relationship. It's giving in to the idea of me being the master of these things and letting them have some agency back. And so my relationship with my work is always kind of that conversation.
So color checker, in a sense, is a little, I mean, you've passed it off to that animation to do the work.
Yeah,
And
I did. I made all those decisions, of course, but I made them in such a way that something emerged that I didn't expect, that I didn't plan. It was setting up a system of that that generated its own outcomes, in the simplest of ways, really. I I also wanted to circle back to the idea of these things that being kind of old friends. Um, a couple of things about that um, that unpredictability of color and space, and the the variability of that, was a problem for me as a young artist, that I felt like I couldn't resolve. And and now it's an asset, right? Now when I realize that I don't have to kind of prove a mastery over this situation, that I just have to set things in motion. Uh, the returning to some problems that I couldn't solve when I was younger, and too adamant about being in charge of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And now as an older artist, I'm able to kind of relax with it, and utilize the situation better, I think. The other thing about being the old friend that really has been fun is um, um, I bought a camera last summer, that a digital camera, is a used camera, and I couldn't find, I couldn't afford an expensive lens, so I thought, well, I'll buy one lens to get started with, and I bought a 50 millimeter lens, and I
It's kind
started
of a
looking.
standard portraiture lens traditionally. Yeah.
Yeah, and it pointed out to me, that I learned how to document my own work, and these kind of frontal kinetic sculptures that I made for many years, um, with a Pentax Spotmatic camera, a film camera with a 50 millimeter lens on it. And when I started looking through this camera with that lens, there was a familiarity, and all of this animation is done through that lens. So there's kind of this history of how I see things through a camera, that are uh, that are very familiar to me, and kind of intuitive.
That's interesting because in photography, which long ago I dabbled in a little bit, the 50 millimeters was kind of the neutral lens. It didn't zoom in, it didn't
Yeah.
wide angle anything. So it's kind of like the normal view, whatever that means.
Well, and these things have a scale to them, and all of my work has a scale. And you see the especially kind of the signal sculptures that we have, with that you have up there, that are on the speaker stands, with the rotating lights, or the boxes sitting on top of the stands. They all have a very much a one-to-one relationship with me. It's me and this object are kind of, we take up about the same amount of space in a room. We um, and I'm not sure why that is, but I've always made things to that kind of personal scale. Even when I was making kind of the light bulb sculptures, or uh,
Yeah.
most
Now that
everything
you
else.
say that, I can see that.
Yeah, it's me and this thing, and it remains conversational, and it's something. Even when I'm making motorized sculptures, it's something I can pick up and move around. Um, I've always loved that about the idea of the personal scale of painting. Even big paintings you can move around by yourself because of the weight of them. And, it's
That makes me think of the way we're currently exhibiting. some of these animations now is a way different scale
Yeah.
than, and just to go back to our earlier conversation, it was a little tricky to get things that worked reliably on the internet for folks on different devices, including phones,
Yep.
tablets, PCs.
Yep.
And now here at the gallery, we've projected these animations onto a wall so they kind of encompass you. They're scaled way up.
Yep.
I wonder how you feel about that, not being here to
Yeah.
see it
I,
in person.
that it was, because I don't know that I've ever shipped my work off somewhere for I've put work in group shows and shipped it off and done that kind of thing, but to set up an installation, I think I've always been there. And this was an unusual thing for you um, to set it up. It's interesting because we kind of inverted the problem. We made the primary part of the exhibition the internet version, and
Yes.
the gallery version was kind of almost the physical documentation of the internet show, right? Where usually we see the internet as the way to give you documentation of the real show. We kind of inverted that, and to kind of amplify that for me, it was really nice to just turn that over to you and to say, I think what Joe does in the gallery is going to be a really interesting conversation, and I didn't expect it, and it was a different way of thinking about the work in operation, and quite nice. It was quite nice to let go of that. I don't know that I want to do that all the time. I really like composing in space with these things. But the things that you chose out of your inventory of my work to put with the videos, the rotating light, which actually which actually one like it ended up in some of the animations,
Yes.
and the box on top of the stand, which a couple like it ended up in the animations, was really nice to see, and that held that personal scale. Those objects in the room held the personal scale and let the video do something else.
So as you know, the first iteration of that was before people were really coming into the gallery during this period that could be seen through the front windows from outside.
Yeah.
And now it's been moved into one of our smaller galleries where the light control is much better. It's much more visible. It basically covers almost the entire wall at the end of the room, and the sound is more clear.
I
And,
think
and we do have the one sculpture with the box construction on top of a speaker stand in there as well.
that's
So,
nice. The that goes back to the idea of using these things in different ways, that they're kind of multi-purpose tools that can be used. I think of them maybe like the stack of flats in the back of the theater with the braces all in a closet somewhere, and you can rearrange them and put them in different ways and paint different things on them. I, so much of my reference has been the pragmatism of electronic signs and billboards and even fences and things like that. The pragmatic world that we live in, the infrastructure of it. that when in turn these things start to head back in the other direction towards their origin of the reference. So when the video and the sign like sculpture start to get to act like signs again, by drawing attention to the space and drawing attention to themselves through the window when people are going down the street. I find that really, really quite nice, and really letting the work reside in its natural habitat.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
We did it okay here. So
Well, and in Duluth, you're driving down the street and you see that rotating sign in the window, and if you look beyond that, you're seeing the hill full of towers and the flashing red lights, and so the kind of the infrastructure of all of those signal towers behind the downtown area in Duluth is quite invigorating, I think, and really a part of the kind of language that I've always attached to.
yeah, that's something to point out. There's a lot of times Jim's work is, if it's in a given city, and of course he's most familiar with Kansas City, it relates to what's in the city out and about.
I tried.
You're thinking about that.
I am thinking about that, and all of these things, we want some sort of attachment to the world we live in. I found a quote the other day to start, and I can't remember the name of the artist, and I'll butcher the quote trying to tell it to you, but it was basically the idea that the site of a piece of art is where the making of something and the non-making of something interact with each other and form some sort of resonance. So it's like where an artist makes something and where it is and what the context is, that resonance is actually the site-specific nature of what art is. So I believe that, and I also, to the extent that that the paintings hanging on the wall can try as hard as they want to exist within the frame of that painting, but you take it out of that room or out of that time of day and you move it somewhere else and you put it in a different context, it can't possibly mean the same thing that it meant in that last context. It can come close, it can hang on to it really tightly, but if you decide you want to let go of that need for it to maintain itself, then it becomes this dynamic object that can infiltrate environments that you take it to, and to me that's exciting. I think I've tried to make work for a long time that does that.
That's a good way of thinking about it. Even when we install work at the gallery here, sometimes we'll show the same painting with a different show, or we'll end up emphasizing a different aspect of it, or just like you say, it relates to the other objects differently than it did in its first exhibition situation. Makes sense.
The idea of a collaboration with the curatorial aspect of where the work goes is critically important. It's the same concept when you walk into a museum and you see the narrative of the relationship of the objects and the pace of walking through the gallery, and you see the historic narrative that the museum curators are trying to present to you, and so it's the same in a gallery where the relationship between the paintings is its own composition. And I find it exciting to kind of if I can put something useful out into the world where it has its structure, and it can kind of maintain itself, but it also offers itself to other possibilities. I think that's a pretty good thing. I think we have to get used to that sort of rearranging of our understanding of history as in the same kind of way. It's, history, as they say, is written by the winners, and as we are in a time of completely reassessing our national history,
Indeed.
we realize that we're blind to many things because we try to maintain that one history that we know. So the more we can do to offer an agility to, to viewers with our art or with our writing or whatever, the better off we are, I think.
Well stated.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that, but it's something that we've certainly been thinking about a lot.
Should we talk about maybe one of the other animations?
Sure. The long one that's in the gallery, and I think maybe we put that. We're going to find a way to put that on the website. I think we were talking about it. It's called Duratone.
Yes.
That was the kind of the last
the last one that you did.
It's very similar to the certain objects and certain systems that's the longer video on the website. So we maybe could kind of talk about both of them. But it was ultimately what I'd love to do is put each one of those. This is like a different level of project, but put each one of those loops as a kind of a randomized relationship with the other ones and see what happens. But I played with these things for so long, and if we look at the interactive set of the 8 different ones that the viewers of the site can play with, the 2 longer videos are me doing that, are me kind of playing with them in the editing mode of Adobe Premiere, where I'm moving them and I'm then playing it back and I'm seeing what happens. They are as improvisational in that sense as the interactive part is for the viewer. And I was looking for different kinds of rhythms and different kinds of changes of pace, different kinds of harmonies of like how a shadow moves up on one and maybe it moves sideways on another. Maybe there's a rotation this way and maybe a rotation the other way that are stuck with each other. Maybe there are moments where there are 4 2x2 of these loops that are causing all kinds of chaotic sets of relationships and interacting with the sound. But those longer ones are me playing with how far I can go to make them as non-linear as you can make them in a very linear system. that one comes first and then there's the next one and then there's the next one when we're moving through time in a very linear way. But I think you can disrupt the understanding of that. And that's what I was trying to do in those.
And it,
But
of course, those have sound and it varies as that goes along. And it seemed to me like you, you paired essentially the animations were responding to the sound and vice versa that they were paired with. I thought that worked well. And
I
you had one image, I think, towards the end where it was simply a shadow that pushed, all the way out to the edges, almost beyond the frame.
yeah.
There was no object, just, and it's almost like when you're watching, you don't realize that at first. The shadow is so substantial, and then you realize it's a shadow.
All of those, what's so lovely about those for me, Joe, is a lot of them might seem like they're on a motor and I'm just sitting there videotaping this thing, but I'm moving those a little bit and taking an image and moving those a little bit and taking an image. So it might take me an hour or 2 hours to get one rotation, and I'm really examining the shadow and what it's doing so carefully, simply because it's taking so
Mhm.
long, and then it comes to life as the animation, and it's just a really wonderful making moment to to experience over and
I
over.
bet it is. Of course, when we see it, it's up and running, but
I think Kirsten and I were talking about one of the there's something slightly uncanny about the movement. We were talking about one of the rotating boxes because I'm not using any measuring devices or any, I'm guessing each time I move it. I'm trying to, so the speed has a little bit of variation in it, right? It doesn't, and it might have some little jerks in it, almost imperceptible. I'm trying really hard to get it right, but there are flaws because of the nature of the process, and it almost feels in that uncanny state like it's a 3D model that I modeled in the computer to look like the physical object that is rotate right, and it plays with our sense of
you tried to
perception.
get as close as you could to the real thing.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. But it is absolutely the real thing, and I've just taken it out of its precision slightly. But these are all super high resolution photographs, really sharp focus on these things, and I just really uh, I really am drawn to this really super sharp clarity of these images, um, and the harshness of the shadows, the direct light on them, and everything. There's so many things wrong with them as photographs that make them really wonderful as animations.
Mhm.
But
I can recall where on one of these you had a really strong shadow of a cord and it moved off to, it kept moving off to the right.
yeah, and those kinds of we go back. I think I posted something on my Instagram page on my Instagram site the last week of an anime of a video that I shot in my studio probably in 1988, 89, of some sign pieces, and I recognized the way that I was thinking about the animation of light signs, like chasing lights around a border and things like that, how I'm seeing I'm seeing with that tool when I'm doing some of these animations.
Of
Like when
course, those don't move smoothly. They move kind of one at a time, right? Or however
that's right.
you
But you
set
can
it
speed
up.
them up. Yeah, yeah. But no, and so that you know, how you get something to look like it's going all the way around a framed sign is by just moving, you know, moving a flash on and off, on and off, on and off. It's not going anywhere, and it's such a pristine animation. It's you can't see it standing still. It always moves.
Another aspect of these animations that I think of, just being familiar with your work, and especially work in person where you're thinking about where a viewer might want to be and whether it's easy or not for them to kind of be in the primo place to experience something that you built. The On these, if you want to read the label on one of these metal boxes, or if I can't recall what the other thing I was trying to do was, but I just can't do it. And so I'm thinking that's appropriate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. There's a sense of denial, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
in all of that. I think so, and I think you know I've always thought that when I get a response with kinetic work that I've done, I get a response from viewers that say, "Oh, you could do this, or you could do this," or it tells me usually that I'm in the right place, that I'm just doing barely enough,
Uh-huh.
and I'm not pushing it too far. The idea of restraint has always been really important to me, um, because that leaves the situation ripe for kind of invention from the viewer as they go forward, and that's a that's a positive that's a positive place to be, I think.
Agree. As a viewer, you can both kind of think about, you know, what it could be, or you can also think about, why the artist didn't give something to you.
Yeah,
And you almost start thinking about your own preferences themselves. It's like, why do I need something different,
yeah.
than what's in front of me?
Well, and it's the pace of these videos also is important to me, that you're engaged with it for quite some time. You're not, 30 seconds or a minute of one loop is a long time to be looking at this thing going around in circles. And it gives you, I think, it certainly gives me the opportunity to kind of experience it up against a variety of my expectations of what I should be seeing. So it's me examining what I want from the thing, and I'm with it long enough to have a real thorough examination of that.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's what we owe artists who do the work, the kind of the time and the commitment to really examine what they're offering us, and what our expectations. This is the kind of the boundary that you look for and try to get to with students is what are they able to see, um, and what are their kind of internalized blind expectations that don't allow them to see more, and how can we get through that boundary. And it always has to do with a series. It's the same with our sense of multiculturalism right now. It always has to do with what we're blinded we're blind to. It's what we expect to happen, what we think we're owed, what we think we're like supposed to get out of this, and finding a way to help viewers get through that and start to see something they didn't expect, or that they didn't know that they might want.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not sure if I'm saying these things clearly, but for me, the way we experience art and the way we make it and the way we learn things from that experience really maps onto the political trouble that we're in as a culture, and our inability to be agile with our expectations and with the offerings that everyone has, are where problems start to fester. So I think we do good work in that area. I think galleries and museums and artists all, if they're working to kind of loosen up the expectations, then we're doing good work.
That's a good way to think about it, because I'm sure there's a temptation to push artists in particular towards addressing certain kind of issues with their work, rather than just letting them work
Yeah.
in their particular realm, and more generally, opening up possibilities rather than addressing a specific issue.
I think that's exactly right. And you find that problem in public art these days, where there's an impatience or a panic to kind of get to the problem solving part of the thing, and force it into existence, when that's really not solving the problem at all. It's perpetuating a lot of things. So I'm a fan of letting artists do whatever they're going to do, and take it or leave it, I guess, at the end of the day. But exceptional things don't happen if you don't do that.